Hello, hello. Welcome to our event. My name is Ari Kim. I will be your moderator for this excellent panel discussion. I'm excited to meet you all. Joining me is a whole host and team of instructors and folks who just know all the things about the admission process. So I'm joined by I'm joined by Maria Loftus, Jen Wasco, and Claudia Mikhail. And joining me off camera is Laura and Carrie. And so we will be more than happy to answer any questions you have about the admission process. We have a great little discussion all lined up to talk about like the bigger issues and then some of the problem areas and the things that you guys can all work on getting a head start on. Because I know if you are attending the discussion right now, you are the planners. You're the folks who are trying to get a leg up on, the process that is going to be really all crazy and busy this upcoming summer. So welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you all here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of throw my little microphone over to Maria, and she will introduce herself, and feel free to kind of pass it on to the next panelist.
Thank you. And I echo Ari's comments that we welcome you to join us this evening. My name is Maria Loftus, and I am an admissions consultant here with Kaplan. But before joining Kaplan, I was the Assistant Dean for Recruitment, Admissions, and Financial Aid at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, where I was for about 20 years. And during that time, I had the great opportunity to not only represent the Western Medical School, so that was Colorado West, to the Association of American Medical Colleges Committee on Admissions. And what we did is promulgated best practices. And then I also worked with admissions committees across the country. I also had the opportunity to chair that committee. And so all the time that I spent on the committee is I got to learn a lot about what other medical schools do. And it was always surprising to see that other schools did things a little bit differently than we did. And that's an important message for applicants to appreciate, is that all of us are different. There are certain things that we all focus on, but when we look at it and how we look at it and how much weight we give it varies from school to school. And so I'm happy to be here this evening to share some of those insights with you. And I'm going to turn it now over to my colleague, James Wasco.
Thanks very much, Maria. My name is Dr. Jim Wasco, and in my medical practice career, I was an emergency physician, trained in Boston, and my career was in Boston. I've retired a few years ago, and my major interest now is in medical school admissions. And I've been a member of the University of Michigan Medical School Admissions Committee for going on 20 years. And my role on the committee is to review applications in a screening method. We get lots of applications every year, as do most medical schools. It's in the thousands of applications each year. We obviously can't interview thousands of people, so we set an interview number in the few hundreds. And our goal in the admissions committee is to take the large number of applications and cone it down to interview the candidates that we feel most represent what we're looking for in the school. So beyond doing the screening, I also do one-on-one interviews in what are called long-form interviews. Those are 30-minute interviews, in which cases we have conversations about the individual's journey to medical school, what their experiences have been, try to get a handle on what their communication skills are like and really why they want to be a doctor, and to personalize all the information that they've given us on their application. I also work in the athletic department at the University of Michigan, counseling student athletes who are going into medicine. For the last 3 years, I've been an admissions counselor for Kaplan, and it's been my pleasure and privilege actually to meet so many people from around the country who are applying to medical school. And I look at it in a very exciting way that the people that I'm seeing, which are you out there in the audience, are the doctors of the future. and you are the people that we're going to be seeing when we get ill. And we are eager to work with you, to share our experiences with you, and to help you understand what medicine is like, and to help you appreciate the journey that you've had to get to this point. And I'm looking forward to participating in this panel discussion and hearing some of the questions that you all have. So I'll turn it now over to Claudia.
One second, Claudia. I believe you are still muted.
Hold on a second. Oh, you unmuted me. Okay, thank you, Ari and James and Maria. It's good to see you all. I'm Dr. Claudia McHale. I'm a board certified physician specializing in preventive medicine, public health, and clinical genetics. I published a textbook called Public Health Genomics, The Essentials several years ago, and I'm currently practicing and teaching in Los Angeles, California. I attended Princeton for my pre-medical training and Icahn at Mount Sinai for medical school, followed by Columbia and UCLA for my residency and fellowship training. I've been a Kaplan medical admissions consultant for over 15 years and have helped many traditional and non-traditional students achieve their career goals. And like James, it's really a pleasure getting to know the future of medicine by working with students like you. So I look forward to this session as well.
Great. Thanks so much. And folks in the current live streaming audience, we do have a chat for a reason. I asked you all to tell us a little bit more about yourself. You're welcome to ask any questions you have. We may or may not get to them, but the more interactive this session becomes, the more it is structured for specifically you. So let us know what questions you have. I do have a little bit of an agenda though, but we can always tie in additional questions as well. So application process, we are speaking specifically for the 2023 cycle, although from what I understand, there are no major changes for those folks who are in the current application cycle as well. If you're looking kind of a little bit ahead into what you might have to do, I'm sure the general process is going to be mostly the same. The application services in the States, there's like 3 major ones. Most of the specifics we're going to be talking about today is probably centered more towards like the MCAT, which services most of the American MD schools. The process is a little bit different for DO schools as well as the Texas med school system. But the generalities definitely apply across. It is quite different in Canada, I will admit as well. So what I thought would be interesting for us to do is talk about the major kind of big components, the parts that is a little bit more flexible, a little bit more dependent on you and your input. And what I thought I would do is I asked every one of our panelists to break us down a little bit about that specific process, what it is, what their top tip is, and what may be a big pitfall about it. So I'm going to start with Dr. Wasco. Can you tell me a little bit more about the works and activities portion of the application?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to, Ari. Work and activities is a section of the application where you can define your journey to medical school. And I'll start off by saying that, if we have 100 students in front of us who are applying, or 1,000 or 10,000, everyone's journey is different. After you have thought about your personal statement, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later, we'd like you to focus on the activities that you've had, the experiences that you've had that you feel have helped you galvanize your interest in medicine. Your interest in medicine may have started many, many years ago, or it may be recent, but the activities that we're particularly concerned about are the activities that you have had that make you feel like you really want to be a doctor. So what kind of activities are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about basically research activities, service activities, as to volunteerism, and shadowing opportunities. But you may have had jobs that have also contributed to your maturity, to your growth, to your perspectives. Any awards that you may have had, those go into the experiences. And if you're an intercollegiate athlete, you can write about that as well. And then any hobbies that you have that you think are interesting. Are you a piano player? Are you an artist? Do you like to cook? How do you fill your day? How do you get rid of the stress that you have in your life, or at least mitigate it a bit so that you can get through the day and really enjoy the day? Bottom line on all of these activities is, what have these activities done in terms of helping your perspective on medicine and your growth and maturity relative to the medical field? So with each activity, you're allowed to have up to 15 different activities to write about. And I would encourage you to take the opportunity to write about 15 activities. Yeah, those people who apply, who submit maybe 8 activities or 9 activities, we tend to look with disfavor with that, because we like to get a broadened picture of who you are, and what you've done. So the more activities you put in, up to 15, the more we like it and the more background we feel we can get on you. For each activity, you're given 700 characters to write about it. That's 4 or 5 sentences where you can describe what you've done and what the activity has meant to you and what you've gleaned out of it. But after you had a list of the activities, we then ask you to select 3 of the activities and call them most meaningful. By calling a particular activity most meaningful, the MCAT application will give you an additional 1,325 characters. So a total of 2,000 characters to write about. And this will give you the opportunity to say, why have these 3 activities been the most meaningful to me, to make sure in my own mind that what I want to do is the field of medicine. Now, the activities don't have to all be related to medicine. They can be jobs where you've learned how to deal with people. They can be research where you've learned critical thinking, with or without medicine. But when it comes to medical experiences, the more hands-on experiences, the more clinical experiences you've had, whether they be in the research area, the volunteerism area, the shadowing area, or the jobs area, those are particularly meaningful because you're telling us how you have really interacted with people and how, after you had the interaction, you are confident that this is what you want to do for your career. So I'm sure Maria and Claudia will have some additional things to add, but that's my initial take.
Sure. Yeah, that was an excellent overview. Thank you so much. I was going to share actually a mnemonic that some students can use to help guide the way they approach the activity section. Something I like to tell my students is to think of CARES, C-A-R-E-S. So C stands for clinical experiences, clinical exposure. A is academic experiences, academic honors. R is research. E is employment and extracurriculars, which includes the hobbies you mentioned. And S stands for service and community service. So this is kind of a nice handy guide to make sure you're covering most of the major activities that would be salient to your application.
And
You know, Claudia, every time I work with you both, I learn something. And I just learned that. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Sure.
My contribution is from the perspective of the admissions committee. And we believe that how you live your life tells us a lot about who you are and what you value. And so we're looking to see that, yes, absolutely, that you're doing these service activities or research activities or clinical activities. But at maybe an even more fundamental level than that, it's that you are engaged and involved with the world around you, that you are giving of yourself, your passions, your knowledge, your experience to make the world a better place for other people. And so as you choose activities to be involved with, absolutely, they should be things that are important to you, whether they're medically related or not. Yes, you are applying to medical school. So yes, many of your activities should be medically related, but we want to see that you are engaged and involved and a whole person which means you are going to have interests outside of directly medically related. And to do things in a way that you are committing yourself to that activity. We're not impressed by one-offs. We're not impressed by general membership, where you can show up if you want to, don't show up if you don't want to. Nobody's really going to notice if you're there or not there. As a personality trait, that's not what we're looking for. So pick those things that have meaning to you and invest yourself. And in so doing, we will see the qualities that we're looking for.
That's really great advice. I love the idea of not having like a giant list of things you got to tick off, but really using your activities to showcase who you are as an individual. I found that, when having conversations with students about the application process, that, some of them were looking for more like, I know what I am, like, I know who I am, but like, what are people interested in? And I found that a list, of what med schools are looking for was a helpful way to at least get started on viewing the activities that a person has. So I did want to highlight for our students that, the AMC does publish these core competencies. There's like 15 of them. They all kind of subcategorize into different things that actually align a lot with what Dr. McHale was saying, like interpersonal skills, thinking and reasoning, your science knowledge, your interpersonal skills as well. So I do recommend you all to consider checking that out. You could just like Google it. They have these 15 core competencies for those who are entering med schools. And so reading that over might help bring to mind the areas that you are already personally involved in, but you didn't realize would be as like a strength for you as an applicant as well. There's a great question. I was wondering if I can get one of my panelists to actually answer it. Dr. Wasco, can you tell me a little bit about clinical experience that is kind of limited to one workplace versus like, is it better that, our applicants have a sampling of a bunch of different things?
Well, I think it depends on the individual journey that the applicant is on and what their interests are. Frequently when I talk to students who are applying, they'll say, oh, I only have 5 volunteer activities, or I only have, so many hours in research or whatever. You shouldn't compare what you're doing with what other people are doing, because their journey may be very different than yours. Someone who's very interested in research and who has spent 2 or 3 years of research with a few thousand hours, maybe publish some papers, you're not going to duplicate that unless, you are a really research-oriented person yourself. On the other hand, you may have a vast experience working with homeless populations or with the elderly populations in nursing homes, or community organizations that reach out to disadvantaged and vulnerable populations. It's more important, I think, to have quality experience. If, for example, you have 10 hours in each of 5 experiences that are volunteer, I would rather you have 50 hours in 1 volunteer experience rather than 10 hours in 5 volunteer experiences. Because first of all, you're going to learn more about it. You're going to get to the basis of it. You're going to feel really meaningful there. It's as if you're going to really be making a difference, which is what medicine is all about, is making a difference, as both of the other panelists have said. And so when it comes to clinical activities, and again, clinical activities are important because that's what the field of medicine is all about. And you can have clinical exposure through a job. You can have it through volunteerism. You can have it through research. And the big deal with clinical experiences, though, is how much interaction do you actually have with patients? It's one thing to sit in a doctor's office and shadow a physician. It's sort of a passive opportunity there, but much better if you can find an opportunity working with patients where you are actually doing the interaction, becoming an emergency medical technician, learning to have nursing skills in a nursing home, becoming a doctor's assistant in a doctor's office. Those are the kind of experiences that really mean something. So, I hesitate to say, here's the formula that you should follow, because we don't have a list in the admissions committee on our wall and check off what people have. We're looking to see what your interests are, how you have followed those interests, and how meaningful your experiences have been in order to follow those experiences.
One thing I like to do when I'm discussing activities with my students is to really ask them, what were the most memorable moments in that experience? So you had a clinical activity. Is there a specific case that really made an impression on you? Was there a disease that you were inspired to learn about? So really to see that the student was actively involved and participating in that clinical interaction is a really important thing. So like you said, Jim, that's another thing to highlight in the application, making sure that it made a personal impact on you.
And many medical schools do list as a requirement or as a recommendation that you have shadowing experience. But I want you to know that's the floor. That's the minimum. That is not the be all and end all. We would much rather see more that you have done and been involved with. And oftentimes, and I'm sure Claudia and Jim would echo this, that we're talking to an applicant to medical school and they'll say, I've got X number of shadowing hours. Is that enough? Mm-hmm. And that's the wrong question. Mm-hmm. This is not about, have you checked the box? This is the profession you say you want to do for the rest of your life. And it should be something you feel passionate about. So this should be something you want to be doing and you want more experience, as opposed to saying, have I checked that box? Am I done?
Mm-hmm. The other question we might talk about with all three of us is when should you be considering activities? Some people will say, do my high school activities count? Well, I would say it all depends. If you started doing research when you were in high school and you've continued a research orientation through college, then I would say by all means, put that in, because it shows that you've had a long history of learning critical thinking skills and learning investigation and expressing your curiosity. On the other hand, if you belong to a club in high school and it had no relationship to anything that you've done in college, then I would say don't put it in there. It's sort of, what have you done for me lately? That's what we're looking for. And when you realize that a lot of people are applying to medical school, not only during their undergraduate years, but 1, 2, 3 years after they've graduated, your high school might be 8 years ago. And what we're really interested now is, what have you been doing lately in order to verify that this is the career that you want to be in and satisfying your curiosity?
The instructions actually say that it's from high school graduation forward, but I totally echo what Jim said. If you started something in high school that you have continued, I would list as my dates from the time you graduated, because that's the instructions. But in the description, you could certainly have a sentence in which you allude to this being a continuing activity. That's certainly going to be true if you had a lifelong involvement with playing a musical instrument or playing a sport. You didn't just start when you graduated from high school. It's something you've been doing for a much longer period of time. But what we're looking at to count is going to be from high school, graduation of high school forward. And I also totally agree with Jim that it is kind of a, what have you done lately? And so if we see someone reaching back to activities that were 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago for people who are now out of college and they're applying, which is the norm, by the way. The norm is not to be applying as a rising senior in college. The norm is for people to have had one or more gap years. But if they're listing activities from a long time ago and they're not particularly significant, then it looks like you're putting them down to kind of pad your application, that you don't have a lot to talk about more recently. And we are looking at who are you now, as a person, not who were you 5, 6 years ago.
So I would just add in summary, if it was a formative experience that has had an impact on your life and shaped you, then you should speak about it either in the activities or in your personal statement, or if it's something that you've continued to do. So I look back on my own experience. Some of my earliest clinical experience was in high school. I was a candy striper in the maternity nursery ward at our local hospital, and I ended up going into genetics. So it can have a lasting impact on you, what you do. So make sure to capture that if it's important to you.
I think we should probably also mention, when you are writing about a particular experience, the application is going to ask you, what was the start date of the experience? What was the end date of the experience? And what is your estimation of the hourly total that you've put in? And one thing to keep in mind is that you are going to submit your application to medical school approximately 15, 14 months before you actually would be matriculating into medical school. So admissions committees are going to look for, what are you going to be doing during that 14-month or 15-month period? And so if you are doing research, for example, or you have a job, or you have a shadowing experience and it's going to continue, then you can put the end date into the future and estimate the number of hours that you will be spending between the time that your application was submitted and the time that you will start medical school. Now, the caveat here, though, is that if you think in your mind that you want to become an EMT, but you haven't started that process, they won't accept an activity that says, well, I plan to become an EMT and start working in 2 or 3 months. On the other hand, if you haven't started a job yet, but you have an opportunity and an arrangement to start, then you can put that in because it's already committed. So it's not what I think I want to do, but what you've already done and what you're committed to do.
Another real common question we get about activities is, can you talk about something that you've done, both in your activities as well as your personal statement? And I'm sure we're going to be turning to the personal statement any moment now. So let me just say that, both places are an opportunity for you to tell us more about you. We want to know more. So if it's a significant activity, maybe it's one of your most meaningful, and you also want to write about it in your personal statement because it does, it's part of your journey to this day. Great, but talk about it from different perspectives. So don't just repeat the same information, and God forbid, don't, word for word, just repeat yourself. But even if it's said in different words, if it's the same information, that's just wasted character space. And that's not going to serve you well. So talk about it from a different perspective. And as Ari mentioned earlier, be thinking of those qualities that we're looking for, which are the AAMC's 15 essential competencies. And even if you're applying to the Texas schools or the osteopathic schools or Canadian schools or any place else in the world, every medical school in the world cares about these qualities. And so as a, for instance, if let's say you played collegiate sports and that was one of your most significant activities, whether it's a most meaningful or not, it's still going to be a real significant activity because of the time commitment. And if in your activities you were talking about how this experience really taught you time management skills to be able to successfully handle all your academics and successfully handle the practice schedule, the travel schedule, everything that goes into playing collegiate sports. I mean, absolutely, you would have to get down your time management skills. So maybe that's what you talk about one place. And in the other place, your personal statement, perhaps you're talking about how playing this sport, being a member of a team, really shaped you, your maturity level, your coming to a place of, at one time wanting to be the star of the team, and then growing into what does it mean to place the team above your individual interests. So that's adding value to us because now we see you from multiple perspectives as to how you grew through this activity.
Well, what a wonderful way to transition onto the exact same thing I was going to talk about, Maria, and that is your personal statement. So I'd like to actually just turn it back on over to you. Can you maybe backtrack a little bit, give us a bit of a description of what a personal statement is? I hear a lot from students and from discussions we've had with you about telling a story. So what does that mean to tell a story?
It means just what it says, in terms of it's a narrative. It is the narrative of your life, of how you've gotten to this point. Since you're applying to medical school, this narrative is about why do you want to be a doctor? Where did that come from? How have you tested your motivation? What are the things that you have done which have affirmed for you that this is the right thing, the best thing that you could do with your life? And along the way, that you are demonstrating through your stories qualities that we are looking for. So I, as the reader, not only agree that you sound like you've investigated the profession, you know what you're getting into, you have the qualities that we're looking for, that I like you when I read this, and I cannot understate that. The importance, this is a people profession, that I have to, when I'm reading this, I have to like you at the end, and that I want to meet you, and I want to see you come, as an interviewee, because I want to continue this conversation, if you will, that I've had through reading your story. And everybody's story is different in terms of where the genesis of this idea of who you are, where that came from. For some people, it starts before they were born, the families they were born into, the circumstances they were born into. For other people, it was something that happened maybe in late childhood or early adolescence, whether it was an illness or injury on their part, or someone that they loved, or it was that, you were in college, you'd always been good at science, you always enjoyed teaching, you always were someone that your friends looked to, and along the way, someone said, you make a great doctor. So everybody's story is going to be different as to where this idea came from, how you have tested your motivation. But at the end, like I said, for everyone, it's that we want to individually, as the readers of your personal statement, that we believe in you, believe that, yes, you absolutely have the right stuff. Like I said, that I like you and I want to meet you and invite you for an interview.
Well, Maria, I totally agree with everything you've said, and I'd like to add 2 words to the personal statement description. One is introspection. And that means that, we don't want you to give us a million details of a job that you're doing or an experience that you've had. What we're looking for is, what did this mean to you? And as Maria said, how did the activity that you're writing about, the experience that you're writing about, how did it really shape your career goal? And so we're asking you to dig deeply here now and tell us why is medicine the right career for you? And the second word besides introspection is passion. We want to get out of the words that you write a strong feeling that this is a commitment that you are making to yourself and to your career and to your families now and in the future and into your life, that this is something you want to do. And here's why. When I have an experience with patients, what do I feel? How does it mean something to me? It's so frustrating when we read a personal statement and we talk about somebody whose major activity they want to talk about is their critical thinking that they've established when they were doing research. And so I've learned how to do this test, and then I've learned how to do this test, and this and this. And then I was supervised by this person, and this person was a Nobel laureate, or this and this and this. And nowhere in there is, what do you feel about doing this research? What is the meaning of it to you? How is it impacting you? How is it making you feel like you want to be a part of this journey to medicine? So introspection and passion, those are the two words I'd like you to keep in mind when crafting a personal statement. And recognize that you can put anecdotes in there. It's really wonderful to do that if it makes your points. It personalizes the application and it makes us understand and feel more about you when you personalize it. But try to limit your personal statement. It's only 5,300 characters long. That's a page and a half. But don't set aside saying, I want to include 6 separate things in here, because you'll have so many different items that you're writing about that each one will not have the impact that you want it to have. Sit back and say, what do I want people to know about myself? Let me put that down in writing, and then let my work and experiences sections verify that I have done this to confirm to me that this is what I want to do. So again, innovation and passion.
Wonderful. So I'd add, the biggest piece of advice I have for the personal statement is to speak from your heart. So we really want to hear you speaking. We don't want to hear you writing what you think that we want to hear. A lot of students feel the need to write that anecdote, and the anecdote turns out to be the whole essay, and then you don't really get to hear about, what their thoughts and feelings are. So speak from your heart, and don't, follow the formula you think you have to use. Just really speak about why you want to become a doctor, what you've done that's proven that to you, and what you really want to achieve as a physician in your life.
And
Go ahead, Maria.
Couple other things to add. That one, this is your essay that's going to all the schools you apply to. So you need to be thoughtful about being maybe too specific. You're going to have lots of other essays that you're going to be writing that the individual medical schools that you apply to will ask you to then write. These are the secondary essay. And so this is not the only opportunity you're going to have to write and tell us information about yourself. But this is the one that is going to all the schools that you apply to through that application service. So I wouldn't specifically say, I want to be a researcher unless a research physician, unless that is what you want to do, because it's going out to everyone. And so if you were applying to a medical school that maybe was more focused elsewhere, not on producing research physicians, and that's what you said, that maybe could turn them off. Or, if you said something a little too personal about your interests. So remember that the personal statement is going to all your schools, and then you'll have individual essays that you're going to be sending to each of those schools. The other thing is, after hearing everything that we've said, you may have the sense that this is not going to be an essay you're going to sit down and write in an afternoon. And it's not. It takes effort. It takes time. It takes pulling out, your feelings and your thoughts and your introspection, as Jim was saying. And for most of us, that's not something we spend a lot of time doing. So it often takes weeks, if not months, of, steady effort to write this essay. And along the way, it is very helpful to be getting feedback. Feedback from your pre-med advisor or your faculty or physicians you work with, or us, people who have seen these essays, know what an effective essay feels like, from the part of the reader, and can help give you that feedback. And just know you're probably going to end up ripping it up and starting over many times.
It isn't unusual, Maria, in my experience, and I'm sure in yours and yours too, Claudia, to have people go through 6, 7, 8 drafts. And sometimes you can get burnt out writing it. So, a good idea to spend some time with it, then put it aside, and then go back to it when you've, had a chance to digest things a little bit more and receive feedback from people. I don't know what your recommendations are individually, but I like to tell people that should be the first thing they start thinking about when they're thinking about their application. If you're going to be submitting your application in the end of May, probably 3, 4, 5 months before that is when you should start thinking about it. Unless you are a skilled writer, and most of us aren't. And even if we are, this is going to be a very meaningful document. I can tell you from my own point of view, and I review lots of applications on a regular basis. Personal statement is the first thing I look for. It's the first thing I read in an application and go from there, because reading that tells me who you are, what you've done, what your goals are, what your motivations are, and dare I say it again, what your passion is.
And I'll just say the first step in that process is to do that first draft and just use that as an opportunity to just pour out your thoughts onto paper. Don't think about character counts. Don't think about structure. Just get your thoughts out on paper and then work on polishing it up.
I feel like if I was a student and I poured out my heart into a piece of paper that way, and then somebody was like, start over again, I'd be like, you're ripping my soul. So I think, we had some questions about like who would be good people to review your personal statements. I thought that was a great question, because I think you'd want to choose people who, one, know what that's actually supposed to look like, right? So have some experience. So maybe people who've already gone through the process, or are professionals like yourselves. But two, like people who aren't, like, don't ask your best friend to read your personal statement. They're not going to be as honest with you as somebody who is a little bit more removed from that. And I cannot stress this enough. I think it's really important that people take the step forward and be a little bit brave, and get other people to read it, and maybe learn some constructive criticism tips, as well. This is such great discussion. Thank you so much for all of those great tips. I have
Harry,
one
also,
other big thing.
I think we should also say that grammar is really important in the personal statement. And that's another reason why you need to have somebody to review it. So, that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. many opportunities to make it as polished of a story as we could tell. So I agree with all of that. Dr. McHale, I have a question for you and obviously for all of our panelists. I always kind of thought that the selection of specific schools that students want to attend to was a fairly almost like a minor note, like pick the school that's near to you, pick the school that you have dreams about. But after reading a little bit more into them, like, oh, it's pretty complicated. So want to tell us a little bit more about that process, like what schools to pick, how to pick them, what other additional opportunities a school might offer.
Sure. So sometimes people think, the more schools you apply to, the better your chances are. But to me, the best way to go about it is with a strategy. You want to pick a school the way you pick a friend. Is this someone that you can build a good relationship with? Is this someone or a school that you have something in common with? Someplace that you would flourish and it'll bring the best out of you. So number one, just on a demographic note, is you want to apply to your in-state public schools, because first of all, they're going to give you a geographical preference over applicants from out of state. So that's just in terms of stats. And then you want to look at their teaching philosophy. What is the approach that this school takes? Are they promoting independent learning? Will you have to be learning most of it on your own, or are they more didactic oriented? Is it a school that starts with clinical experience early and that's something that really interests you and helps you learn? So look at their philosophy, their mission. If you're interested in dual degrees like MD and PH, does the school offer that? Will there be electives in areas that you have an interest in and want to explore in medical school? So really get a chance to look at the schools in detail and see if you really mesh with that school. Because if you mesh with them, they're going to feel like you mesh, they mesh with you. It's a symbiotic relationship. And a good way to start in that process is to look at the MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements database, that has a plethora of information on all the different schools. They tell you their accepted MCAT scores from the 10th percentile to the 90th percentile, the GPA ranges, the mission of the school, their MCAT minimums, the demographics of the students, their ages, where they come from. And then also, if you explore the school's websites to look at their special programs, what makes that school unique? What type of physician do they want to train? Is that the kind of physician you want to become? It's really important to be compatible with the school. And once you pinpoint that, what you want out of the school and what the school is looking for in a candidate, then you're a lot more successful in selecting the right school for you.
I'm just going to add to that because I agree with everything Claudia said. But to let you know that one of the most common secondary questions, so an essay that you'll be asked to write by the individual medical schools, and one of the most common interview questions is, why us? Why did you apply to us? And at the interview, the bookend to that question is, and why should we accept you over all the other fabulous applicants we've got? And there may be 1,000,001 reasons that you've got why you applied to a school. So this is where you need to put your Psychology 101 hat on and think about your audience. What is going to be important to them? They don't care that you're going to get to live at home. They don't care that, you like sunny weather, or if you're coming to San Diego, that, you're a surfer in your spare time. That is not important to them. It may be very important to you, but it's not what we are looking for. So you want to focus your answers on those commonalities. So they're absolutely true, but they're the things that you know the school is looking for in terms of the type of medical student, the type of physician that they want to produce. So what is it that you're able to glean through the MSAR, through their website, through students that are going there or graduates that you may know, in terms of what is the school, what are their goals, and the extent to which your experiences, your activities, your career aspirations fit with what they're looking for. That's the magic. That's the sweet spot. Those are the things that not only should help you pick your schools, but then those are the things you want to talk about.
I totally agree with both of you, and it's a very personal decision when you decide which medical schools to apply to, but there are some consultants around that can help you. If, for example, you have research experience in your undergraduate program, you should talk with your principal investigator or other people who are involved in the laboratory and find out where they went to school, what experiences they've had with professors and other researchers around the country. And they may have very good advice for you in terms of what schools might fit what they know about you, and how you might fit into the programs that they have. If you have professors outside of research, and you know that they've gone to an Ivy League school, or they've gone to a Western school, sit down and talk with them. What is it like being a student at the University of California, San Diego? What is it like going to the University of Cincinnati? What is it like going to Harvard University? And use that as part of your decision process. If you have a good relationship with your professors and your mentors, they're going to want to help you. They'll be thrilled that you've asked them for their advice, and take it, because there are a lot of medical schools you can choose from. And if you've got a good starting point with some people who know you and know you well, take it.
Great, thank you so much. I think lots to think about, more than I would have thought, again, like I mentioned, with regards to schools themselves. So, our viewers, like, really make sure you are getting that information about the schools. Don't just wholesale. When I talk to students, I'm like, where do you want to apply? They're like, anywhere that'll take me. And I'm like, you want to look into it a little bit more than just, I think it almost even gives a bad perspective on the part of the student. I'll just go whoever takes me, instead of thinking, well, what school is a good fit for me? What do I want out of my education, and not just what can I offer? It is like Dr. McHale said, so, it's like a symbiotic relationship. You are giving, you as a person, and they are providing you with that opportunity to, grow you as a person as well. So I think that's all really good. I have let's see, I have another question. We did get some questions about letters of recommendation. I thought we just, like, very, very briefly, we don't have a ton of time left, but briefly touch upon, like, who are people that are good for letters of recommendation? How soon should students be asking, the letter writers to start, like, even thinking about the process? What should students provide with the letter writers as well? You don't just want to ask someone and then just, like, assume that they know all the things about you. So Dr. Wasco, why don't we start with you?
Well, again, this is a very personal thing. And I would think about the individuals that you've had from an academic basis, or a research basis, or a volunteer basis. Any activity that you've had that has been substantial is a potential source for a reference, somebody who knows you well. What I would do is go to the individual and say, well, first of all, let me say that most schools are going to have requirements. They're going to want you to have at least one reference from a faculty member in one of the sciences, or maybe more. But beyond that, go to the professor that you feel you've done well with their class. and you know them well and they know you well, and make a presentation to them. Tell them flat out, I am applying to medical school and I would love to use you for a reference. And what I'd like to do, though, is sit down with you or give you a resume or in some way have a conversation so that you can hear directly from me what my motivations are, what my goals are in life, and what I learned from you when I was in your tutelage. Academicians, coaches, volunteer instructors, all of those kinds of people will be pleased that you came to them because you are now saying, I want you to be a part of my recommendation. That tells them that you had a good relationship, you learned a lot from them, and you want to share where you're going in the future. I would give them several months. Faculty members are busy. Don't go in the 1st of May and say, I need a recommendation written for you or written for me by the next 2 weeks. They're going to want to give some real serious thought to this. They're going to want to really dissect what they want to say. So give them some time, give them the respect that they're due. So in summary, if you're an athlete, it could be a coach. If you volunteered extensively for a program that deals with disadvantaged people, go to one of the leaders of that program and ask them to give you a reference. If you're doing research, ask the principal investigator. And in classes that you've taken that you've done well with and you've really thought them to be formative in your career choices, go to the professor, make your case, give them all the information they need, and you'll be pleased.
These also need to be people that you've had a personal relationship with, because what the medical schools want your letter writers to be writing about are those 15 essential competencies. The instructions, you should give the AAMC's instruction sheet to your letter writers. And I would argue that you should give that same instruction sheet, even if you're applying through a COMAS or TMD-SAS, except that they wouldn't pay attention to the first page because that's talking about specifically how to submit the letters through MCAT. But the second page says, this is what we want you to write about. If you have had the opportunity to observe that Joey or Mary possesses the one or more of these qualities, please let us know and tell us the context in which you have observed it. Gone are the days when we want the letter writers to say that you were 4th in the class of 500 and therefore have shown the necessary intellectual ability to successfully negotiate the medical school curriculum. We already know that. We can see the grade on your transcript. That is not what we want to know. We want to know who you are as a person. We want them to speak about these qualities. Well, they can't talk about those qualities if they really don't know you. So that may mean that you need to be cultivating that relationship between now and whenever it is that you'll be applying to medical school. And it's never too early to be putting yourself in a position that these people get to know you.
So I have 2 follow-up points really quickly, Maria. If you're not yet applying to medical school, I know a bunch of you are still not at that stage yet. If you're still in school and you're still taking classes, make sure to make use of office hours with your professor. Get to know them. They'll know your face, your name, and who you are. And that's a really big step in developing a relationship and getting a recommendation. Secondly, for students I work with now, they said, well, how should I approach my letter writer? What should I do? So there's actually an AAMC webpage that gives guidelines for letter writers. So there's a link if you search for that on Google, and it addresses what the letter writer should speak about in their letter and take a look at that and see, is this professor able to answer these questions about me? And select the professors that you think would be able to answer those, appropriately and comprehensively for you.
There's just some great practical advice. I was totally going to mention the office hours, or at least, I think it's November, right? The applications don't open until May. So I think there's enough time if, you're out there and you're like, I don't know who to ask. Put some thought into cultivating those relationships now. It's not too late. I think if it's in May, then it's going to be really tough to have that if you don't already have it. Thank you so much. This was always these events are always so full of information, and I know our viewers probably have follow-up questions, and I do want you all to recognize that this isn't an easy process. We can't give you like yes, no, do this, do that kind of answers. It is, because you guys are unique as individuals, it means that, the advice is going to be always kind of cultivated towards to you. I am going to do a quick little screen share real quick to show you a little bit about what we can offer you, including some free resources. So stick around, don't run away, but hopefully this is okay. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick screen share now. Okay. I know we didn't really touch upon the MCAT at all during our discussion, but it is a pretty big component of the application process. So check out the little QR code if you want to know a little bit more about our options with Kaplan. We have a huge Black Friday sale coming up next week. So if you have been a little bit on the fence, save some money and consider checking that out. We do have a program specialist as well. You can talk to someone who actually is in your region. They might give you a little bit more of the goods for like what are the specific things or the ins about applying in the specific area you live in. And then I also want to mention that we have Dr. Wasco and Dr. McHale and Maria Loftus, all our admission consultants. So you can actually book time and talk a little bit about your specifics. I know we had a lot of really specific questions come in. I do apologize. We can't really necessarily answer them all, but if you do want some expert advice that way, come consider booking some time and talking with one of our consultants, and they'll be more than happy to share with you some of the insights that they've gleaned from the years that they've been working. Thank you all so much for your participation. Thank you all for your questions. Come check out more events that we have soon. But other than that, have a great rest of your Sunday, everyone. Bye.